All right. Take one.
All right.
I don't know who this is. I'm not answering it.
Oh, I should have a phone conversation with them. I could have put that in.
Okay.
Take one.
Take one.
Yeah.
Okay, TJ. So, first off, maybe I should introduce ourselves. I'm Matthias. I own the house, and this is TJ.
And I own the business.
Yeah, he owns the business of painting this house.
Yeah.
So let's kind of like just start off with how this all like happened. And like basically what happened is I bought this house not like knowing that it's hard to paint.
Yeah.
I thought it was like every other structure that you could just paint it like with normal paint.
Quick and easy, yeah.
Yeah, quick and easy, no problem, like roll it on. And that turns out to not be the case. So like, I didn't even know that like there was a Facebook group where like people talked about like repairs on the home. Mm-hmm. When I first started talking to you. And then like after I kind of already committed to like painting the thing, I learned, and after we learned that it's hard to paint after we already bought the house.
Right.
And so I was like, okay, this isn't good. Mm-hmm. I've just bought a house where there's like a bunch of like scuffs and like discoloration everywhere. And apparently like you just can't paint it because it's enamel covered steel. It's got porcelain like coating on it.
Right.
So I went to you and I was like, hey dude, I need to borrow a sprayer.
Yeah.
And then you want to say what you said?
Well, I first asked for what, and then you kind of described to me the uniqueness of this house, and I basically said, do you know what you're doing?
And I said, absolutely not. So
yeah. So that kind of started the conversation of, you know, what to use, how do you get this house painted? What is that process going to look like? Basically.
Yeah. And like my plan, so this was my plan. My plan was I was going to go borrow your sprayer.
Right.
I was going to go like buy like tons of like, I had no idea like the amount of primer you needed either to like do anything.
Yeah.
I was gonna buy like 1, 2, 3 bullseye because that was something that like they said on internet that would work. Mm-hmm. And then then I started talking to you and you put the fear of God into me as to how difficult it is to use a sprayer, A, and like B, like it's like metal's like the hardest thing to paint.
Yeah, metal is not very forgiving when it comes to painting because like drywall paint soaks in. With metal, it stays on the outside. And so if you put too much on, it's gonna have a thickness, and as far as durability, that'll flake off first. If you don't spray it thick enough, well then it's not covering and you're getting something that you don't like as far as a finish. It's not looking uniform. So metal's very unforgiving in that way. Yeah.
And so you quickly learned that I didn't know what I was doing.
Right.
So explain to me what was going through your head when you learned that I was about to paint like basically a 10 out of 10 in difficulty for my first time painting a house.
I realized quickly you needed help. You needed help. That basically I had said, hey man, I'm willing to help you. Obviously you didn't have any stuff moved in here yet, which is a huge pro.
Yeah.
It was a bare house, just ready to paint. Once I guess the walls were cleaned, I guess. So I had to inform you that, hey, you're going to need someone to come in, clean all of the walls down, which you hired somebody to
Yes,
come
we
in.
hired somebody to basically like take ammonia and water and literally just like strip the surface of every single piece of porcelain and metal
Right.
everywhere in the house.
Yeah.
Ceilings, walls, like around the windows, everything.
Yeah. So that happened. Then I kind of had the conversation too at about this time of, are you aware of, metal primer, its costs, paint, what we're using? Just kind of had to go through the step-by-step process of that.
Yeah.
That was a little bit, I think, shocking for you to know that metal primer isn't cheap.
Yeah, turns out metal primer is not cheap. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So,
but we were committed to the process here by this point. So like, me and, well, I would say me and my wife, but it was more like me and like I grabbed my wife's hand and jumped off the cliff.
yeah.
That was a little more like what actually happened.
Yeah.
So I like tell you the uniqueness of this house, and you call up Sherwin-Williams because that's who you work with.
Yeah, so, Sherwin-Williams, use all their products. I have a rep that I can always reach out to. I've painted the exterior of metal homes as, metal siding. That's a common thing. But the interior is a little bit different just because the products they use, you can't use an exterior rated paint or primer inside of a house. So that works a little bit differently. So I reached out to my rep, just wanted to get that clarification, just warranty wise to make sure that I'm using the correct thing, that it's going to hold up, that we're doing all the right steps and process. And so I reached out to him.
And I think I had you call him after he like recommended the product. I had you like call him again to double check.
Yeah, you did. Now that we know that, I don't know if I called him again.
Oh,
I'm pretty sure I called him the first time.
I know that you said that like you said that you had mentioned it was a Lustron home, and like he seemed to know what that was.
He did not. He didn't know what it was.
Oh no.
He reached out to a different rep, basically got back to him, and then through that process we figured out the product and everything that we needed. But he was very confident once he knew, because he reached out to a commercial rep, because inside of like commercial spaces, they're painting a lot of like metal beams and stuff like that, and so they essentially said
a lot of different surfaces.
Right. So they came to the conclusion that what they're using as a commercial grade for like steel beams on the inside, that type of thing, that you would want to use a similar coating for that as you would for basically a Lustron house.
Sure.
Which tends to be a little bit more of an expensive quality, higher quality.
Yeah.
Primer.
Do you want to grab the primer?
Yeah. So this is Sherwin-Williams. It's a direct to metal or DTM bonding primer. It is, protective. It's like protective and marine coating is what it says on here. Retail, this stuff is about 170 to 180 bucks per gallon, which I know right away you hear that and you're like, yep, out of the price range. If you can get in contact with a business owner who has a contractor account with Sherwin, they can get it a much better rate. Or I know Sherwin has a few 40% off sales every year. So if you really are thinking about painting your house and you want to get something that is going to for sure work, I'd recommend you waiting till one of those sales comes out and then purchasing it then to just save some money.
And to be clear, just so that for the off chance that there's something for legal purposes, we are not recommending you do what we did.
Yeah.
We are saying this is what we did.
Right.
To be crystal clear.
Yes.
And we will get more into that
Yes.
in just a second, when we should probably start talking about why or how the project actually went.
Yeah, so how it went. So obviously first started out cleaning, primer,
Masking everything.
windows, trim, floor.
Yeah, laying down drop cloths over everything you didn't want covered.
If you don't want it painted, if you don't want it painted, you need to have it covered, especially in such a small contained space. If you start spraying, it's gonna be a mess fast. Yeah. And so more is better when it comes to covering your floors and other things. So yeah, when we first started spraying, one thing we did not consider was it's winter time in the Midwest and it's super, super cold, and humidity changes from the inside of the house versus what the humidity is on the outside of the house.
Yeah, and it's not like sheetrock, it's metal. So, well, we had two problems. We had two problems. One was certain areas of the house were too cold for the primer to bond.
Yeah. And
so we had to heat up those rooms it had to be very hot in the room in order for the metal to actually be warm.
Right. And we did a decent job of making sure the house was pretty warm.
Yeah.
Then the second issue obviously was the humidity. If it's too humid and then cold meeting hot from outside coming in, condensation became an issue. Yeah. At a certain point.
Well, and it was like just straight up like paint was drying and we were just shooting water into the air with the sprayer itself.
Yeah.
So like it got humid quick, and
when we got through we got completely through the first bedroom, and then about halfway through the second bedroom, I had just went to go check in on that first bedroom, and I noticed that like it was condensating and it was like starting to like run down the wall, which for me, I have never seen in my life, and was like, it was an absolute nightmare. It was an absolute nightmare.
Yeah, it was like after we did that,
I finished the wall that I was doing already, and then I had just said we got to basically let it dry out and figure it out and figure out what's going on. So that brought me back to the rep. Basically, that's how we confirmed it was condensation. So we ended up waiting for it to dry.
I went at it with a knife and like basically scraped it off and then sanded it down.
Yeah, so basically, sanded it back.
Yeah.
And it's not that it's irreversible by any means, it's just that it was a time consumer to just basically have to restart, in the sense that, we had to basically restart.
Probably buy at least one extra gallon.
Right, that costed us an extra gallon or two primer, which was unfortunate, but basically we reset, and we had to dehumidify the rooms as we went, and I basically went from one end of the house, painted one wall, to the opposite end of the house, painted a wall. So I was painting one wall in one room at a time. Yeah. And just measuring humidity just through dehumidifying, and
we had a dehumidifier running to like help with the humidity in the air.
Right. And kind of using it as a gauge to see how humid it is too at that time. So all to say, would not recommend painting a Lustron home in the winter if possible.
Yeah, I mean,
because that's an environment change that you can't change the environment. And it's too cold. It's
and like in retrospect, I'm very happy with how everything turned out. But this was like 10 out of 10 difficulty. There was like one night I literally like sat in my room as I was like scrubbing, like sanding it down and being like, I just went into a lot of debt and I just ruined this house. And and then like for the next like 2 months, I was like, is this gonna flake? Is this gonna fall off? Everything feels like it is like really on the wall.
Yeah.
And after like scraping it too and sanding it, like you can obviously chip it off. It's on a metal smooth surface, so like if you come at it with something, it'll come off. But it's not easy. It's not like it. I have no doubt that it is on that wall.
Yeah, it's good to go. So after resetting, getting everything primed up, took 8 gallons of primer, I believe.
Yeah.
We bought a 9th because we used a little bit into the 9th gallon, but had we not made or I guess had it not condensated and we had to reset, it realistically would probably take about 7. That would be a fair estimate. So if you're thinking about painting it or painting and priming it, I would just start out with 6 gallons, and then if you need to go run to grab one more, that's fine. But based on the square footage, I'd say start out with 6, might need a 7.
And then we went through a boatload of snowbound.
Which is so kind of getting into the painting process.
The actual top coat on this.
So we used super paint. Went with a semi-gloss paint, just to kind of keep it that original sheen kind of. And to give it that reflective metal look that makes the Lustron interior so unique. And so super paint, semi-gloss. We went with, the color was snowbound, and we, I believe, used 13 to 14 gallons of this stuff. It was a lot. We had done 2 coats over the top.
Yes.
And so we primed it, and then we did 2 coats of paint. And so 13 to 14 on that paint.
Yeah, I think we grand total had 22 gallons between the 2.
Yeah.
It was a lot of paint.
Yeah.
It was a lot of paint.
And then we, cabinets, you can see are black. That's tricorn black. I believe we needed 2 to 3 gallons of that stuff too.
To do cabinets and then the kind of inlet in the living room.
Right.
Yeah.
And so painting was, much easier process. Just kind of went through with that and took 2 coats, and obviously the ceilings, 2 snowbound. We ran through that, and
and we went back to Sherwin-Williams because we kept on thinking this will be the last couple gallons. This will be, and so we went back 4 times because
right. You don't want to be left over with 4 gallons of paint. So we just kept going back and grabbing gallons as needed. But I'd rather do that than leave 3 gallons of unnecessary paint back at the inside your small house, taking up a bunch of storage.
You can answer this. I'll kind of answer this question and then you can answer it. But I'm super happy that we did it. Mm-hmm. But if you asked me, there was another Lustron house, would I go in and help them paint? I would absolutely not do it.
Yeah. For me, if I did it, just professional opinion, I would probably not ever do it again in the winter. Just from a business perspective, I could probably have painted about 4 houses this size if it was drywall in the same amount of time in the winter. In the summer, maybe a little bit different story. Because just that humidity and regulating it and just bouncing around the house, it just became a lot more time consuming, and just waiting for things to dry longer than it normally would take. I would probably decline any winter Lustron home painting. Also would not recommend it as a DIY. Summer, I would potentially take it, but again, I could still probably paint 2 houses of similar size in the summer versus just doing 1 Lustron house. So I would probably have to charge a lot more than I would normally for just your general house. So
he did most of the work.
Yeah.
And it was 10 out of 10 not fun for me. So I can only imagine the 10 out of 10 not fun it must have been for you.
Yeah, no, it was an experience. I loved it from the perspective that I learned a lot about painting interior metal. And now if I did it again, it would be a much smoother process, but it's always fun, from a painter's perspective. You paint drywall all day and it doesn't really deviate too much. It's not too hard. It sometimes can be a little bit boring, but I can say that this was not boring by any means to paint. It was, it was definitely a headache at times because we're trying to figure out, what's going on. But once we got everything sorted out and looking at how it looks now, it's this is what you put in your portfolio as a painter, because it's unique and it's cool, and
Oh.
I would do it again.
All right. Well,
Yeah, I would
thank
do it.
you.
I would do it again, just not in the winter. So.
All right. Well, thank you,
Yeah.
TJ. It was a pleasure chatting with you today, and thanks for doing this. I love the smooth surfaces. Like, you know, it's not like grainy. It's a nice smooth surface like the original texture.
Yeah.
And it's a pleasure and it adds to the house because of the quality and craftsmanship that you brought here. So,
Yeah, man.
all right.
Yeah, I guess if anybody has questions about, you know, if you're thinking about painting your Lustron house and you have questions about, you know, how do I do this? Maybe it wasn't discussed here in the video. I'm actually on the Lustron Facebook group page, so I'm willing to comment if you have any questions about, you know, hey, this situation came up, or hey, what do you use in this instance? I'm totally willing to come in and give any advice that I can bring, or I also follow the YouTube channel, so if you have any questions or comments in there, I can respond to those as well.
All right. Thanks, TJ.
Yeah.